HR issues can kill you. One complaint against your company can turn your world upside down. And you spend way too much time dealing with HR when you should be spending your time on making a profit. You should talk to Bambi. With Bambi, get access to your own dedicated US-based HR manager starting at just $99 per month. They get to know you and your business while providing HR expertise and the personal touch you need and want. They're available by phone, email, and real-time chat, so onboarding and terminations run smoothly. Team members reach peak performance, and your business stays compliant with changing HR regulations. And with Bambi's HR Autopilot, you'll automate important HR practices like setting policies, training, and feedback. HR managers can easily cost $80,000 a year, but Bambi starts at $99 per month. Schedule your free conversation today to see how much Bambi can take off your plate. Go to Bambi.com right now and type in Accelerate under podcast when you sign up. It'll really help the show. Spelled BAM, BEE.com. Bambi.com. Type in Accelerate.
Somewhere out there, there's a man on a park bench eating his 500th PB&J. He has no idea Papa John's has new papadillas that are way better than a boring sandwich. With Papa John's best meats, cheeses, and veggies hand-folded into a crispy flatbread crust. Someone better tell that man. Get a new papadilla in 1 of 4 flavors for just $6. Better ingredients, better pizza, better than a sandwich. Papa John's. Not valid with discounts, fees, and taxes. Extra prices may vary.
Welcome to Accelerate Your Business Growth with your host, Diane Helbig. Diane is a leading small business development and leadership coach, author, and speaker who is passionate about sharing valuable ideas, tips, and techniques with business professionals worldwide. Diane brings you the world's experts and gurus in all things business. Whether it's sales, structure, social media, planning, or plateauing, guests bring their expertise and energy to each episode. When growing your business is your focus, Accelerate Your Business Growth is the show to listen to. Got a topic or guest suggestion? Let Diane know. The goal is to make sure you have the information you need to move your business forward. Thanks for joining us. Settle in and enjoy.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining me. Today's podcast is sponsored by Audible.com. You probably already know that Audible.com is a leading provider of audiobooks in, all genres, but you may not know all the other spoken audio entertainment and information that they offer. So we are providing you with a free trial. If you go to audibletrial.com/businessgrowth, you can sign up for that trial and you can explore on your own and find the content that you have been looking for, all in one place. It's like the best. Over the years, this podcast has continued to be recognized as a great resource for small business owners, sales professionals, business leaders of all kinds. We enjoy inclusion on lists of the best podcasts to listen to. And that is really because of the guests. These are folks who have expertise in a particular area of business, and they join me to have a conversation where they share that expertise with all of you. Today is no different. My guest today is Jim Canterucci. Jim is the founder of Transition Management Advisors and is CEO of the software company Constituent Hub. Jim works closely with executive teams to help implement the strategies developed in the boardroom. He's the author of Change Project Management, The Next Step, The Skill Set of a Change Leader, 7 Essentials for Emerging Leaders, and he is also the author of Personal Brilliance. Jim also writes to leaders every Saturday morning. Thanks so much for joining me today, Jim.
Oh, thanks, Diane. It's a pleasure to be with you. I'm looking forward to our conversation.
I am as well. Now, you use the term change leadership very specifically, and I'm wondering if you would explain why to us.
Sure, Diane. In the business world and in the consulting world, it's referred to as change management, or OCM, organizational change management. And I just simply feel like you really can't manage change. What we have, right? What we have to do instead is lead through the change. So I'm a little persnickety on the language on purpose, because I really think change leadership is what we're about and what we're doing or should be doing. So it helps with the mindset. Although I realize we're never going to change the lexicon. It's going to be called change management forever. But in my little slice of the world, I try to use that language because it helps create the proper mindset around what we're supposed to be doing as leaders.
So, and you know what? And I totally get that, because when I talk about time management, what I say is you can't manage time. It's a thing, it just happens,
Exactly.
but you can manage your decisions. So I totally get where you're coming from. Yeah. Okay. So communication is a big part of leadership. And you talk about a really common problem. So that leaders have, where they have to communicate even when they feel like there isn't much to say. So tell us more about that.
Sure, Diane, in our change methodology. So picture, a big company, and they're implementing a new computer system across hundreds and thousands of people, and there's a big project going on, right? That's a change project. And so in our methodology, for example, we'll communicate to the managers every 2 weeks and let them know what's happening so they could share that with their teams, right? So it typically happens where maybe the project's a little bit behind and not a lot has happened since the last communication. And so, we're just going to stir up trouble by saying we're behind. How about if we just don't say anything? How about if we don't send out the communication this time? We'll wait until 2 weeks from now. Everybody should be okay with that. There's not really much to report anyway. That's the picture of the symptom that we're talking about here. And it's a very dangerous phenomenon, because when you don't communicate, even when you theoretically don't have a lot to say, you're creating this communication vacuum. And in that vacuum, we're likely, as audience members of that message, we're likely going to fill that vacuum with negatives. So, for example, we're behind. There might be a good reason for being behind. But if I know we're behind and you haven't communicated, I'm going to go worst case scenario on you, right? And so that causes a number of issues, trust issues with leadership, et cetera. So it's really the symptom and the problem that we have to guard against, and we have to really work hard to guard against that. There's some tips and tricks and so on, but it's really a pretty common thing. I don't have a lot to say. Yeah, let's just be quiet. Let's just not say anything. We're busy anyway, right? But it really doesn't work that way, and rears its ugly head and causes big problems downstream for sure.
Boy, it does. And sometimes I think the leader thinks they don't have anything to say, but they don't realize that they know stuff other people don't.
Right.
So they can forget that other people don't know this stuff.
Yeah, so here's a little formula that I use with my executive clients on this issue. A couple of things when I have this urge that I want to skip the communication. First, explain the truth. So in this case, we're behind. We ran into some things in testing and blah, 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 whatever it is. But explain the truth. It's still the truth then. And you have the opportunity when you're explaining the truth to polish up the edges of where the negativity might be. So you're explaining the truth, you're walking through the ramifications, and that's very important. Well, what does this mean? Well, it doesn't mean anything, because we're going to make up the 2-week delay that we have when we get to this point, right? We're talking details at this point. We're having a conversation, and so where again, I may not want to communicate because it'll be perceived as really horrible. Well, you have some control over that. You, by using your words and actually communicating, you can walk through those ramifications. And you can talk about what we're really actually doing and what actions we can take now that are going to create forward movement and keep the positive message going forward, and keep that truth out there. And we eliminate that vacuum of no communication where I'm going to obviously think the worst. And so those are a couple of things that you could do when you have this desire to keep quiet and go hide in your office, right? That happens so often.
Yeah, a little too often. And do you think that when you're sharing this information, you can actually also be pulling people into the problem solving?
Absolutely. There's a little co-creation that starts to happen, right?
Yeah.
Because when I'm figuring that out, when I'm arm wrestling over what I'm going to say, questions pop up. Well, then I can ask somebody a question. I can get them involved. They can start to participate in the problem solving. So it might go something like this. The truth is we're behind. The ramifications are it could put our end date in danger. But what we're actually doing is spending time with each of the business units and getting your input so we could figure out better ways to jump the clock a little bit and move things a little bit faster. That's a wonderful message to hear.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, somebody's in charge. All right, good. They're
Yeah.
thinking, but they're doing the right thing. And that's pretty important. And also understand when you want to skip that message, remember, in my example, we're doing it every 2 weeks, but there's regular communication all the time, right? If
Yeah.
I skip that every 2-week message, if I miss one, it's actually telling a lie. I promised you that I was going to communicate with you, and then I don't do that. And what does that do to trust, right? It just
Wow.
starts to erode that leadership trust. It's a little thing. I got home, at the end of the day, I got through my day as a leader, but I really caused serious damage as a result of that one simple decision to not communicate. And that's something we have to guard against.
Yeah, boy, no kidding. Boy, that's really interesting. Because I don't think we realize the domino effect
Mm-hmm.
of not communicating. We convince ourselves that there isn't a reason to communicate or
Right.
that it's going to cause discomfort when really, what I'm hearing is the opposite is true.
Exactly right. And, as you said, at the very least, as a leader, I know more than the people I'm communicating with. And
Yeah.
so I start doing that little trick where I think they know what I know, and so therefore they don't need to hear this, or it would be redundant, or they would be bored by hearing it again from me, when we all know we need we need information repeated. And also, as you said, they just don't know because they weren't in all the meetings, they weren't in all the planning and so on. And so at the very least, I could be sharing those kinds of insights and background. And guess what happens? Engagement increases because now I'm pulling you into the fold.
Right.
I'm getting you involved in what's happening. And isn't that what leadership is all about, really?
Yeah. Now, so let's talk a little bit about, you had mentioned that when there's a vacuum, people fill it with the negative. Talk some about that and the impact that can actually have on an organization.
Yeah, I'll give by way of example. We have a tool that we use in the change process called change breakthrough analysis. It's just a process of asking you to reconcile what you just heard as far as communication is concerned, right? And we get insights about whether or not you really understood it, and also you might have some resistance that's valid, right? You might say, well, that's not going to work. And since you do the work, I want to know that, right? So we do change breakthrough analysis. We had one situation where it was a bank and they were doing a big change, and we did a communication and we did change breakthrough analysis, thank goodness, before we let them leave the room. And one of the downsides that they saw to the change was that we were going to raise the price on all of our best customers. So fees were going to go up as a result of this change. Now, it was really funny, Diane, because all of us who knew what we were talking about and doing the communication looked at each other like, We never considered raising the price. We never thought about it. We never talked about it. It couldn't possibly be a rumor because, it came from nothing. But if we would have let those folks leave the room, they would have thought we were raising the fees on all of the customers, right? And that's the kind of thing that happens in a vacuum. Because if I wasn't even there, right, as the communicator, what would you make up? Right? It sounds crazy, not nutsy kind of things that people will make up, but that's really what happens. People go to extremes, and luckily with testing my communication right then and there, the executives were able to say, come on, no, we never even thought about that. That's definitely not going to happen. That's one thing I could put a stake in the ground on and say, we're definitely not raising our customers' fees. And then everything settled down as a result before that person left the meeting, went to the water cooler, shared that information as if it was the gospel of the project, and we would have had a disaster, right? So that's the kind of thing that happens when a vacuum is created. People will make things up, and they don't have to be based on logic or reality. And so then we're fighting that battle, right? We're trying to walk that back, pull that information in and clarify. And while we're doing that, we're not doing the real work.
Right.
That's the real opportunity cost of those kinds of things. So just like when you're building a house, do it right the first time. Same principle holds true with communication as well.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Thanks for that example. That's amazing.
Yeah, you just never know what's going on in people's experience and what they're dealing with and so on. And, that person might have been a salesperson who was talking to a customer that day, and they were complaining about how high the prices were. So that was top of mind, right? But that's how things start. That's how the rumor mill start, and the trail that I have to then fix as a leader, becomes a problem and an issue for us. And now we're fighting fires as opposed to doing the real work.
Exactly. Right. And you caused it. Yeah. Unintentionally.
Yeah, exactly right. And what that's the funny part. You didn't even know you did anything wrong. I didn't accidentally say we were going to raise the prices, right? You know what I mean? It wasn't even a mistake. I couldn't have prevented it. But by finding out what people are thinking, because you're in the act of communicating, which is back and forth, right? Two-way. Now we were able to identify that misunderstanding and deal with it right away, as opposed to it becoming a problem. So
wow, thank goodness. Oy, that is something else. I'm going to take a quick sponsor break, and then I have some more questions for you.
Perfect.
Accelerate Your Business Growth podcast is happy to be sponsored by Audible.com. Now, Audible.com has thousands of audiobook titles in every genre you can think of. But you may not know that they have podcasts, they have Audible originals, they have guided meditations, and so much more. As a matter of fact, Jim's book, Personal Brilliance, is one of the great audiobooks you can find on Audible.com. And I know for me, so I love the audiobooks, but I like the other stuff too. Like currently, those guided meditations are a lifesaver. And I get to get all that stuff in one place. I think that's one of my favorite parts of using Audible.com is that everything is in one place. I don't have to open up different programs to get what I'm listening for. I think you will find it tremendously valuable as well. So we're offering you a free trial. If you go to audibletrial.com/businessgrowth and sign up for the free trial, you can explore all of the incredible content that is available to you, and I think you're going to be really pleasantly surprised. Today we are speaking with Jim Canterucci about how leaders should be communicating. So Jim, we're recording this, I'm going to say sort of in the middle of the COVID crisis, and I'm thinking that with everyone working remotely, that this communication thing can be an even bigger problem. Are you finding that to be the case?
You're definitely on the right track. When I'm dealing with large change, there's already a level of anxiety that we have to deal with, right? People are concerned about something being different. Is my job going to go away, et cetera? What we've done with the current crisis that we're hopefully in the middle of, and it's not longer than that, the anxiety is even higher, right? So that's one issue, is the whole feeling of being uncomfortable that people have. And think about it, when you're anxious, often you're anxious because of things you don't know. And so that's where communication can help. If you tell me some things, give me some facts, some data, and I'll go next level on you in a second. Sometimes what we have to do is communicate in probabilities, and that's very difficult for people to do. What I mean by that is, I might not know the answer. Are we going to open our office up next month? Might be the question, right? I don't know that answer, but I've worked on it. I've thought about it. I've talked to a number of experts, et cetera, blah, 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 whatever the reality is. And I'm feeling about 75% comfortable that we will open next month. Might be the scenario that we play out, or how I would communicate. Now, here's what's hard about it. Let's say that 75% guesstimate that I communicated was off as I get closer to next month's date. Now I have to communicate again. It's that simple. And that's the hard part. I just have to say, remember we talked about 75% comfort level. It's really closer now. You know, we're not going to make it. It's really a little different now. So I needed to communicate that with you. Here's what happens based on what we've talked about so far. Because I have to communicate in a probability, because I don't know the exact answer, I feel like it's important that I just don't say anything at all. Zero. And so that's where the anxiety comes from. Well, I'm not hearing from my leader. I don't know what's happening at all. That's scary. There's a possibility we might have to reduce our workforce. Here's the probability that that's going to be true. And if it's 5% possibility that it might happen, that's different from it's definitely going to happen. It's in the 95% range that we're going to eliminate jobs, right? It's very different. But if I don't know for sure and I don't say anything and it was only a 5% chance, why am I driving people to anxiety unnecessarily, right? And if it is 95%, wouldn't it be the right thing to do to communicate that so the person could start to deal with the issue and reconcile it? So there's the whole anxiety thing, but then there's also, as you mentioned, working from home, et cetera, the distance thing. So where I might get away with cheating and say, I don't really need to do a formal communication because they'll see me in the hallway and they could ask me a question, which I think is a cop-out, right? We can both agree, but you don't even have that anymore. Right? So I can't even bump into you and ask you what's going on if I'm a little concerned about something or if I need a piece of information. So that makes it a lot more difficult. And then third, let's add this to the equation because of the distance. I can't complain about you as my leader not communicating to me with my buddies because we're not together. So often what happens is you don't communicate. I complain to my buddy. My buddy says, oh, Diane's been really busy on XYZ project. I'm sure if you ask her, she'll have the information you need and everything's all better. Or we'll both commiserate about what a horrible boss you are, right? Either way, that, kind of puts a pin in the tension a little bit, right? I have a support mechanism. So we don't have any of that. And so it's ultra critical at this point that we communicate, we over communicate, we're checking in even when we don't have a solid, good reason to do that. It's more work, but it's necessary.
Yeah, and when it feels to me like it actually creates less work down the road because cleanup is a tough thing to do.
Absolutely. And again, the worst part about cleanup is you're not doing the actual work that needs to be done, and you're just loading up the cleanup pile because you're causing more problems that you're going to have to firefight later on. That's the bad part. It becomes a cycle. And
can you get that trust back if you? Like, if you all of a sudden realized you should be communicating?
Well, sure, you can. It's harder. Obviously, I would rather not have to do that. But, that, of course, it starts with apologizing and recognizing that you did the wrong thing. And you're the boss, so you're never supposed to admit mistakes, right? You're never supposed to apologize. It's just such nonsense. I don't know where that testosterone-based leadership came from, but it doesn't work. And so just, you have to bite the bullet and say, okay, I'm vulnerable now. I probably could have done a better job. Would you please tap me on the shoulder going forward if I fall into this pattern again? And here we go. Now let's communicate. And I
Yeah,
think people are forgiving for
I
that
do
stuff, because
too.
they think you care. They know you care. They can see the empathy there. That's what building a solid championship team kind of a concept in your organization is all about, the ability to do that. So yeah, you can recover, but hey, let's prevent it if we possibly can, right?
Well, no doubt. Right. Exactly. Let's err on the side. I'm just thinking about people who have not been communicating and are feeling
Mhm.
that, they're not really being trusted,
Yeah,
what they should do.
and I think you have to be realistic when you are trying to recover from this, right? It's so obvious, and we've all had the bosses who went to a leadership speech, or a training or something. They come back with their newfangled system we're all going to implement. That's not what this is about. This is about true relationships with human beings, and so you have to deal with it from that standpoint. So there are some things that we could do, but and I think we also have an advantage in the crisis mode that we're in. I think we could say, hey, we've been putting some things off for a while. How about if we take a little bit of time now, since it seems like we have a minute or can take a beat and do some of those things? For example, I may have ignored your development plan all year long. Right? And I shouldn't have done that, and that was a mistake. And we haven't talked about it because we were busy. How about if we get back into that? I don't need to announce that I'm turning a new leaf, or trying to get better at this. We can actually do it by doing things, the things that we should have been
Uh,
doing, anyway. Things like creating some new teams for innovation, getting people involved in solving problems and issues, and creating opportunities, cross-pollinating, across departments, maybe getting people to work together that wouldn't have otherwise. Those are things that we may have put off because we were busy, and now we might have an opportunity to do that. And how about if we teach something? Often, you and I get hired to teach people, right? Often,
yeah.
and the first thing that gets cut is education and
Yeah.
training. Because we're busy, we've got other things going on. Well, now might be the time to teach something. Can you do it as a leader, or could you bring a professional in to do it? Those are opportunities that really show a different side. And if you've been on that flip side of communication, and you've been dropping the ball there, these are things that might get you started, get that first step towards being a better communicator, that aren't that polished, we have a new program, fill out this form now, kind of a thing, because I just went to a seminar, that is counterproductive. So yeah,
Right.
there are ways to overcome and get better. And this is a practice. We're always getting better at this, and we always can get better and learning new things. And that's okay. Our folks appreciate that on our teams, and can get behind that.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. And then, so talk to me some about the importance of, well, I'm going to say the importance of consistency and long-term adoption, but also the other thought that comes into my head is that knowing when you have to ramp it up, like if you have a really good communication system going, how do you know when it's time when you have to be over communicating?
Hmm. Hmm. Well, let's talk about consistency first.
Okay.
Do you do your podcast, publish your podcast every once in a while?
No, it's on a
When,
schedule.
yeah, whenever you feel like it, right? Because so your audience listening to your podcast wouldn't, they build an expectation. It's going to come
Yeah.
out when it comes out, and in fact, I'm looking forward to that day. I want to listen to what Diane's up to now. Let's plug in. What if you weren't there? That's really what happens with leadership communication when it's missing and it's inconsistent, and it happens every once in a while. So every law of marketing, every law of building a community says consistency is important. Whatever it is, if it's hourly, daily, weekly, monthly, whatever it is, it's got to be consistent. So that can't be emphasized enough. That's very important. Um, the the knowing when to ramp up communication That's really, if you're doing your leadership job, you're getting a sense of your community that you're supporting, and you're seeing that there is some anxiety that's coming, that there are some questions that consistently come up. So it might be time to do something special to answer those questions, that type of thing. I think it has a lot to do with your monitoring process. Communication isn't set it and forget it. It's a monitoring process, because communication by definition is two-way. So what are we doing to listen? What are we doing to hear that there are issues or problems? Or what do we know that's coming around the corner that's going to be a big surprise? It's going to be a big thing to get over, change from a change standpoint. Something's going to be really different. And if we know that, that's when we start to over communicate, or communicate more than the normal cycle would dictate. And the act of doing that actually sends a message as well that says, hey, maybe stop, pay attention, don't skip over this particular note, because something's going on here. We can tell that. And so that's, you're playing an instrument, if you want to think of it that way, a musical instrument. You don't just do it by rote. You're feeling the music and what comes next, and anticipating, and so on. So all of that comes into play with being a good communicator from a leadership standpoint. Does that make sense?
It does. It makes a lot of sense. And when you were talking about that, I was thinking about a situation that like drives me out of my mind, because the communication is so bad, and it's around mergers and acquisitions. It seems
because
like whenever that goes in, like they won't tell anybody, but
because
people
there
hear
are
little
lawyers
rumors.
involved and there are rules, that means we can't say anything. And what I've found is that that's not always necessarily true. There are some things that have to be kept confidential for a period of time, like up until this date, et cetera. But there are other things that, we use the broad brush on everything, so we don't say anything. It's touchy, but it's something that I think we go overboard on as far as communication is concerned. We need to get people ready. And if we were in a merger situation, likely that's the mode of our operation to a certain extent. I mean, maybe not, sometimes not. Sometimes it's a 40-year-old company that gets purchased, right? I understand that. But a lot of times we're in a growth mode and we're doing, that kind of thing. So we can do prep work for these kinds of things. We may have an acquisition coming up. Let's get ready in case we do, and set up a communication model that works. And then if you're in that, a blackout period or whatever, you deal with that. But you don't have to build a communication process from scratch at that point, is the issue, right? That's what happens an awful lot. And of course, that's too hard to do. So we just don't do it and say, hey, let's make a rule. No communication about anything. Just keep quiet. In fact, avoid your people. Don't even look them in the eye. We get weird about it. It's unnecessarily.
Yeah, and I would think that, and like sometimes I think that people don't communicate because they're afraid that their employees are going to leave before, whatever it is that's about to happen. But I think they don't realize that if their employees become uncomfortable enough and nervous enough, they're going to leave anyway.
Yeah, and what kind of work environment and productivity and relationship do we have if we're operating from that position of distrust so much?
Yeah.
And what kind of a leader are you that you aren't building a bench that if somebody does leave, it's really a symptom of general poor leadership when you have that feeling.
Yeah.
It's a symptom, it's something that we would work on, but we wouldn't necessarily be treating that. We would be treating that underlying disease, which would be, you're lacking a whole lot of leadership skills if you end up in that spot.
Yeah.
That's really what happens.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's a huge point. So if you were going to give one piece of advice to the leaders who are listening about what they could do, like right now, this week, to help communicate with their team, what would it be?
2 parts, if you don't mind.
Sure.
One's an easy one, tell the truth.
Yeah.
The second one is really the answer to your question, and that's seek reaction to the truth. So don't assume, ask, coach people, support people, Don't say it and run out of the room, right? Say it and then figure out what the reaction is and reconcile with people. So the communication is just an act, but the process of communicating is something that involves a lot of back and forth. So if there's something that you want to communicate this week, stand up and communicate it, but then stay and reconcile how people have reacted to that communication and how you're going to build a plan for moving forward coming out of that communication. If you take those extra steps, you'll begin to be a very talented communicator. That's where it comes from.
Wow, I just love that. Stay and get the reaction. That's so great, because people do, right? They walk in, they deliver an address, they walk out. You're like,
Yeah.
okay, wait.
I have another meeting. No, you shouldn't.
Yeah.
Don't make another meeting. Yeah.
Yeah, right. Wow, that's so interesting. Boy, Jim, I really appreciate this. This is really just fabulous information. Will you share with the listeners how they can find you and your books and everything you have going on?
Absolutely. There's two websites. One is jimcanterucci.com, the spelling of my name. And that's where you can sign up for the Saturday morning leadership message if you'd like. And then, of course, Constituent Hub, our software package for leading large change in big companies, is constituenthub.com. And there's some interesting things there as well, even if you don't need change leadership software. So please visit, and I'm happy to answer any questions or chat with folks as we go. That's never an issue. I stay, right? So feel free to communicate with me. I'd love to hear from you as we go forward. Thanks, Diane. I really appreciated this.
Oh yeah, thank you. It was wonderful. And listeners, thank you. I think you got a lot of great information here today. And I'd also like to thank our sponsor. Get your free trial of audible.com by going to audibletrial.com/businessgrowth and just explore everything they have to offer. As always, continue to prosper and be curious. And until we meet again on another episode of Accelerate Your Business Growth, goodbye and good day.
Me, but also you. The Pharaoh fast forwards his favorite foreign film, Powder Donut. Okay, what's my line?
The only line I see here on the script is get options based on your budget with the Name Your Price tool from Progressive.
Oh man, that's a tongue twister, huh? I'm sorry, I'm gonna need a few more minutes. Bulbous Walrus, the Bulbous Walrus.
The Name Your Price tool, only from Progressive.
The owl ran afoul of the comatose coxswain.
Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and affiliates. Price and coverage match limited by state law.
Hi, my name is Sarah, and I want to tell you about my podcast called Can I Offer You Some Feedback? I'm a business consultant and executive coach with over 20 years experience in change management, leadership development, and naturally providing feedback to high performers. My podcast is for those of you who have a complicated relationship with feedback, whether giving, receiving, avoiding, or seeking. Feedback is essential for our development. In each episode, you'll hear from real people across industries with their ideas, perspectives, and best practices on feedback. I'll also be sharing business bites with you, simple explanations of organizational tools, management techniques, and leadership philosophies that will help you and your businesses thrive. You can listen to Can I Offer You Some Feedback on your favorite podcast app, or learn more at evergreenpodcasts.com.